Hi everybody, my name is Bill. I am an alcoholic. And for the grace of God, of my understanding, good sponsorship, these steps, and surrendering, I have not had a need to pick up a drink since April 28th, 2001. And for that, I'm very grateful. Before I really start my talk, I just want to, I know so many of us come into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I have so many friends that came into Alcoholics Anonymous and they heard the laughter and they fell in love with Alcoholics Anonymous in the moment, right then. And I just want to clarify that it was not that way for me. I came in after getting out of jail the last time, after, I think it was September 1st, 1979. And I'd gone to treatment before I went to, for court for my last arrest in Montana. And when I got out of treatment, I didn't know anything else to do, so I went to meetings, because I went to a couple of meetings when I was in treatment, trying to look good for the court. And I went to jail with a 50-year sentence, but I'll talk about that later. But my first introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous, I came in, I was one of those guys that would come in, sit in the back, wearing jeans, motorcycle boots, still packing at first, and carried a knife, and I didn't like anybody. And you know how people are in Alcoholics Anonymous, they're friendly, and I just, I didn't get it, and it wasn't a good fit for me. But what I can tell you is that over the years, that this program and the men and women in it, whom I call my brothers and sisters, and these steps worked out of the book with my sponsor has changed my life. And so I want to start with that. And I'll tell a little bit of what it's like, what happened, and what it's like now. And I'm not going to talk too much about, I could talk all night about, my using days, but I'm not going to do that. I don't find a lot of, and I get tired of it, And the reality is that, everybody's story is not the same. And I think the part of my story that's meaningful is that every one of us has suffered that same pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization when we say, burned it down again. And I'm 73, and I can tell you I've been burning the village down since I was 12 or 13. A small village at first, but over the years it just got worse. So I grew up in Southern California in the 50s, and both of my parents were hardcore alcoholics, and violent alcoholics, fist fights, police would come. Back in those days, they didn't do anything. They'd say, "John, knock it off," just quiet things down. And so my mom would get beat up, or she'd even beat him up if he was asleep with a can of soup or something. They were both pretty crazy. And I've got 7 brothers and sisters, and none of them have my history, not one of them. All of them, went all the way through school. A couple did college. I'm a 6th grade dropout. I eventually went to college, but I'll get to that. So back in those days, people would hang out, young guys would hang out watching guys work on their cars, their, motorcycles. And down the street from me were a group of guys that, I didn't know any of this then, who turned out to be Satan's slaves, and most of them are all dead or been absorbed into Hell's Angels, or their life in prison. I go down there, and one day they say, "Hey, kid, get that wrench. Hey, kid, you want a beer? Hey, one day, hey, kid, you want to smoke some of this?" I take a few hits, and I could. By the way, there are other substances in my life, but I am a real alcoholic. No matter what I was doing, I had a bottle of whiskey. Alcohol is the only thing that's ever filled everything in me, made me taller, smarter, better looking. As a matter of fact, I stuttered so badly when I was a little kid because in addition to my mom getting beat, my dad was a closed fist. And not out of anger. He was just in a rage blackout. The next morning he would never remember it. And it would just anger him that, I was afraid to come around him. And so I stuttered so badly. I know now, looking in the rearview mirror, I was a little neurotic. And I don't mean a little neurotic. I mean little this way. I was a full-blown neurotic. I was full-blown, but a little kid. And, I was starting having problems with truancy, early. And police would come, if they could, get my mom to, court. But they gave up on that after a while. But for the longest time, I'd walk in the front door and out the back door, and I'd go hang out with those guys. And I'd get drunk, and then I'd start doing things with them. And when I was 9, 10, 11, I don't know exactly how old I was already identified as a conduct disordered kid. And by the way, I was sniffing glue and passing out in the garage when I was 5 and 6. I didn't even know anybody else that was doing it. But somehow I figured that out. There was never a time in my life that I wouldn't do whatever it takes to not feel like I felt. My parents were the problem, this were the problem, the world, police were the problem, parole officers problem, judges were the problem, everybody else was the problem. And at least as I saw it at the time. But she sent me to, at 9, 10, 11, sent me to live with a guy who was well known for working with, incorrigible conduct disordered kid. They didn't call him conduct disordered, back in the 50s, but incorrigible they did. So I was sent to live with him. And he was a full-blown vodka-drinking alcoholic, which I would have preferred if it had been whiskey, but and a pedophile. And I was there for a year and a half, and I could have left any time, but I got to drink until I got drunk every night. And whatever could happen between a 50-year-old guy and a 10-year-old guy, I am sure that happened, but I have really no memory of it. But I'm pretty sure whatever could happen did. I left one day when it occurred to me, he's a big guy and I'm a little guy, and he's using his fist on me, and that night I'm thinking, I'm just going to put this knife in his back, and I'm so glad that I didn't do that. I just left and went back home. Nobody ever said a word. I never said a word. And the day that I moved in there and found out, what this was going to be about, I vowed in my heart that I would take this to the grave. And I absolutely meant that. And it wasn't just because I'd been abused, but we were real poor. And part of what it was is that, he'd buy me new clothes, and that kind of stuff. And I couldn't bear the thought of saying any of that. And, I started getting in trouble with the law progressively more. At 15, I started riding with these guys. I was probably more like a mascot, but I was crazy. You get loaded, and these guys meant everything to me. They had become my family, and little Joe Larson, who was kind of the master sergeant, taught me to fight. I don't know of what value this is, but at the time it just was amazing. I could hit a bullseye with a hatchet from 30 feet. How to do everything that in the life that I was going to have that I would need. How to use a weapon. And I was there the day little Joe got shot. We're just jumping out of a place and freeze, and we're going over a fence. I've got money and he's got the drugs, and he gets it in the back, and I just keep going. I go to San Quentin, and by the way, from 1959 to 1979, I spent more time in some kind of an institution than I did out in the streets. Early on it was supervised foster care. Then it was reform schools, first for 3 months, 6 months, 18 months. At 18, the first time I was tried as an adult. And let me see, throughout all of these institutions, I knew right from wrong. I just could never do it. I would, when I was in institutions when I was really young, I'd write a letter to my mom. Mom, when I get out of here, I'm going to, go back to school. I'm going to get a paper route. That's how young I was. And I'm going to, just do the right thing. When I wrote those letters, I meant it. Little while later, I'm writing to my girlfriend, hey, Bonnie, when I get out of here, I'm going to get a GED, a job at a gas station, and we can get a place. A few years later, I'm writing to my wife and saying, when I get out of here. And the last time I wrote those letters was to give to my next wife to read to my daughters when they were old enough to understand. And in those, I would always have these real solid decisions that I was going to stay clean and sober. And mind you, I didn't know anything about this disease. I just knew I had this thing that my dad had, and what I knew about my dad is that he's no good. And so I'm no good. And that's kind of what I went with for the longest time. But what happened to me the moment I walk out, I'm walking out the door, and either a bottle of whiskey or a fix, whichever came first. Sometimes it was a whiskey, sometimes it was something else. And I'm off and running again. And then the next time when, I'm face down in the sidewalk with a shotgun in my back. And I never went easy. So I didn't know that if you didn't fight, you wouldn't have to get beat up getting arrested. It just was programmed into me. And, so it was never easy. I was just going to have a drink. I'm back in. What am I going to tell when I was a kid? What am I going to tell my mom or something? What am I going to tell my girlfriend? What am I going to tell my wife? What am I going to tell my daughter? And I had no idea what was wrong with me, because I could I could put the rear view mirror up, and I could see, that I'm really not a good guy. Liar, cheat, thief. I've been piped, shot, stabbed, and I've done those things. And it wasn't until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous the first time, September 1st, 1979. And, still just very raw. And I know now, I didn't then. There was just a ton of trauma and everything else. I'd sit in the back, as I started with. But over time, I mean, and at first I thought that, I had a kind of sense that we all come in here and then we just tell lies about how well we're doing, but we're still doing everything we always did. I mean, that's what a mess my mind was. And so I had thought, well, I can do this. And for the next 21 years, I had an amazing physical sobriety. But I thought about killing myself every day. I'm grateful for that physical sobriety, mainly because I survived trying to kill myself, which I'll get to. With that, when I was in San Quentin, I got a GED. Back in the 60s in the institutions, they were locked down all the time. The only time you could get out is go to church or get a GED. They'd even close down meetings and that kind of thing. So I got a GED with no intentions of ever using it. And then decades later, a career criminal, Montana had labeled me a career criminal, habitual offender. And it's true, but all I really am was a really ill alcoholic who had no idea what was wrong with him. And I don't think of myself as an addict. Only thing that substances were used the same way I did alcohol. And I'm a whiskey drinker, and I drink it like that, And so that's the way I did everything. So I was always in and out of jail. There was nothing going on up here of any real value. I got a job as a tech back in the 70s, in a treatment program. Because, back in those days, what treatment consisted of, is you tell somebody what a lousy, SOB they are and they're full of crap and you kind of break them down. And they told me I would be a really good counselor because I could do that, And so I thought, well, I can do this. So I got a job as a tech, and a little while later they said, we'd like to be a counselor. And then a little while later, you get a degree. A little while later, I get my degree, and a few years later, I'm a clinical director, and, they say, you need to get a master's, and which I get, 2 masters at Fordham University in New York, and, at the end of at 21 years sobriety, I looked so good from the outside, and I would write my own press clips, about how well I'm doing, I'm really doing well, and I would just kind of sandbox that, desire every day to hit an embankment at 90 miles an hour. And in my job, I used to help other men deal with all kinds of secrets. So I did specialty groups, and so I would leave. And I'm crying when they're talking, and they might think I'm crying for them, but I'm crying because I'm a fraud. And I want to hit the embankment. And at 21 years and however many months, I made the decision to divorce my wife, leave everything to her, and go back to Montana. I knew the cliff I wanted to go over, and went back to Montana. I knew the cliff. I'm up there, and I'm gunning the car, but somehow I'm slamming the brake on, and I'm getting more and more angry. I'm just not doing it. I'm screaming at myself. I'm crying. Punched myself a few times. Do it. And then decided just to drive down the hill until I could, find a place to get a bottle of whiskey, come back up. Whiskey gives me nerve. I could do whatever. But I forgot really what whiskey really did for me. And so I've got this little pint of whatever it was, and I could drive back up there, and I'm going, and I can feel it coursing through my body, and of course, I didn't need to kill myself now. I wasn't thirsty when I went to kill myself. I had no idea it was going to happen this way. I had absolutely forgotten the effect of alcohol on my body. And I went on however long of a binge, a true binge. Had a moment of clarity, immediately checked myself back into treatment April 28, 2001. So I am coming up on 21 years, which was the same as my physical sobriety. And this time around, it still took me a little while to get a sponsor, because I was still afraid, And what happened is I'm sitting at a coffee shop in St. Paul, and there's, outdoors, and there's two young guys, probably in their 20s. Maybe one of them was maybe a year or two older, and they've got a big book there. And this one guy is telling the other, who was probably his sponsor, saying, just give us everything. Just jump in all the way. And if just do it for 30 days. Just all the way, jump in. And if you don't feel better, go do whatever you think you got to do. But before you do go drink, and I wasn't going to drink, but I was thinking about killing myself again, And he said to the guy, just do 30 days. And I'm listening, and my ears are like wide open. And I thought, I can do that. I'll do that. I'm going to jump in 100% into the deep end. And that 30 days turned into 3-4 years. I don't remember exactly long. Going every day, some meetings, sometimes twice a day, getting a sponsor, and I have not looked back. And there's a couple of things that I'd like to read out of here, if I could, out of our big book, and then I'll continue. But that's enough to qualify. And I consider myself a real alcoholic. And anything else I did was secondary. It was for oblivion. Alcohol really spoke to me in a very personal, intimate way. And there's just a couple of things that I want to read. And it kind of gets my head right to shift to what it's like today. This is on page 55, second paragraph. Actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. Now, I didn't know anything about God, and when I first started to pray, it was like praying to the wall. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship, by many other things, but in some form or other, it's there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as well as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup, just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. I'm reading this, and when this really hit me, it was cutting through everything and touching my heart, and I'm reading it, and I hear it as truth. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found that the great reality deep down within us, in the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. It is so with us. So that paragraph really, started. I didn't know who God is, and I'm so grateful that, our founders had the wisdom to say, God of your understanding. I grew up Catholic, and, I was told I was going to hell if I masturbated when I was a kid. So, I only did it once. I want you to know that. But, that's a true story. I mean, I went in and I sincerely did that, and then, so many Hail Marys and an Our Father, and I'm okay again. Something didn't sound quite right about it. And the God of my youth always seemed to be standing over, looking down, going, and I don't know, I don't know what I'm going to do with you. And I knew, as broken as I was, and I was broken. I was broken from conditioning as a child. I was broken from the realization of the things that I've done to people in my life, how I treated women. I knew I needed a power greater than myself. So I don't know about you, but I said a little bit ago that I've always known right from wrong. When I was little, I'd swear I'm not gonna act out. I'm not gonna be naughty, whatever it is. Yeah, I'm not gonna cheat. I'm not gonna lie. But I personally have never had sufficient power to change anything about myself, just like my drinking. My head has this kind of weird, strange mental blank spot and peculiar mental twist. And I can, after time, with sufficient force of memory, remember the pain and the suffering of a week, a month, or a year ago. So I knew I needed help. And also I know today I'm not sober because I got smart. I'm still sober today because I have a power greater than myself to help me with my life. And I have these steps. And everything in life is a step. This is a first step issue, a second step issue, a third step issue. And I was taught to bring everything into, make it all happen. So, and then I want to read one more thing, and then I'll continue. And this is on page 62, second paragraph. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. That's guilty, Your Honor, yes. Even when I don't think so. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows. Guilty, Your Honor, without even thinking it, without naturally doing it. Sometimes they hurt us seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that sometime in the past we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and that's this is the source of all my problems today. You are not. Nobody is. This is. And they rise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Guilty. Because I write press clips. God, I'm doing good. I'm on the beam. So I don't see. I don't even need to take inventory. I'm doing so good. and that's nonsense. But that's what my ego and head will tell me. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible, and there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them, even though we would have liked to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. So it's hard for me, like, I love the entire book, and there's, but those two things kind of bring me to, what's happening in my life today, because the God of my understanding is at the center of that. And being present is at the center of that. And I'll tell you what, I'm not concerned about drinking today. The Big Book tells me I don't need to be afraid. Big Book tells me I can go anywhere if I have a reason to be there. And by the way, I have a sponsor. I have a home group, and I should have said that at the beginning. My home group in Naples is the Men's Big Book Step Study Meeting, Naples Men's Big Book Step Study Meeting, which is a Connect the Dots meeting, and I absolutely love it. And if you're ever in Naples, I invite you Thursday night at 7 o'clock from 7 to 8:30. It's an hour-and-a-half meeting. And I sponsor men, and my sponsor has a sponsor. And I talk to my sponsor every week, sometimes more often, but at least every week. So what I'd like to spend a little bit of time is talking about how my alcoholism works in my life. Because that's active, Drinking is not a problem. And I can go pick up anytime I want to. Anybody, we all can. Nothing stops us, except we're choosing not to. But the alcoholism, and I'll give you some examples of my ism. First, I wake up every morning, like right after A, B, and C, where we're arranging all the actors. Sometimes, more demanding, sometimes more gracious, whichever the case may be. So I wake up in the morning and I'm starting to, in my own mind, just figuring out what the day is going to be. And if I'm not consciously present and aware of that, there's another guy that lives in my head that kind of wreaks havoc everywhere. And the only way I can put him at bay is to be present. So I'll give you a couple examples. And, so there was a time when I went to an AA meeting, if, let's say you two guys were whispering and everything, I would just know they're talking about me and they're laughing at me. And in my head, I'm thinking, well, screw them. Now, if somebody else did that too, I would say, I'm not coming back to this meeting. And I've left meetings because of this head. Early on, I did. I've gone back to those meetings since then. But my mind and my ego, if I'm not present, do nothing but torment me, set me up to be disturbed about something. A few years ago, I'm coming home from work, and I've got my briefcase, and it was a good day at work, too, as far as I can recall. And I come in, and I put the briefcase down in the kitchen, and Patty's cooking dinner. And she says, hey, honey, would you mind taking the trash out? But because I'm a trained professional, I knew what she really meant is, you lazy bastard, you don't do anything unless I ask you. And I grabbed the trash, and I don't say anything. I grabbed the trash, and I'm just smoking. But by the time I put the trash in the big garbage can and came back inside, I said, Patty, I don't know who that idiot was, but it wasn't me. And but there was a time that I would have started collecting stamps on that, and then get enough of those stamps, and I'm starting to look at her, and I'm thinking, this isn't the lady for me. You know, and all because of what my mind is just errant things. And I think they're my thoughts, but they're not my thoughts. They're just thoughts. You know, a number of years ago, my boss, you know, I just moved into a new town and I'm doing a lecture, and my boss comes and sits in the lecture, and at the end of the lecture, he says, "Hey, Bill, before you leave, come and see me." So my mind decided right then and there, he's going to fire me. So all day long, and then I just moved here. What am I going to do? Get fired already? But it never even occurred to me of anything else. And, so all day long, I'm useless because I know I'm getting fired. And not only am I useless, I'm strategizing, which is a big problem for people like me. And so I have a plan that I'll go to his office when I'm done, and as soon as I can tell he's getting ready to launch into this, you're no longer needed. I'm going to say, hey, Dale, I just wanted to stop by to tell you that I'm going to be resigning. This isn't a good fit for me. But before I said that, he said, "Hey, Bill, thanks for stopping by. I just wanted to tell you that was a great lecture." So from 10 o'clock in the morning till whatever time in the evening that I left, I suffered. Self-inflicted suffering. And I've done thousands of those kind of things in the course of my life. So to me, that's all part of my alcoholism, because, one is I'm really not present. Two, I'm listening to this only problem in my life, this. And so a number of years ago, it became very clear to me, and mainly, what drove it more than anything. So I've been married. Patty's my fourth wife, and the first one was just turned 18 on an acid trip in San Francisco, and, the next one was the first lady that I met and got intimate with after getting out of prison after 10 years. And the last one I knew was a mistake coming down the aisle, but it seemed like that was the right thing to do. And with all of these women, and not just these 3 other wives, but every girlfriend that I've ever had, it's as if they all knew each other, because they've all said the same thing at the end: "Leave me the F alone." And I'm thinking, God, I'm a prince. I can't imagine that's how far off I am. I'm knee deep in this. We discover that sometime in the past, I saw myself being prickly with Patty, and Patty is the most amazing. She's my partner, and I love her. And we've been together coming up on 19 years. We got married in January. It will be 4 years ago. But I saw myself starting to get prickly with her. And then she would get prickly with me. And then we'd have these little skirmishes. Nothing serious, but little skirmishes. And I made the decision that I had to deal with this. I began to deal with it by holding myself accountable, giving it to God, and talking about it with another man, and kind of telling on myself. And I can't say that I never get prickly now, because I do. I'm human and I'm flawed. but I'm growing, and I'm growing because of this program. You know, I meant it when I said everything in our life is a step. You know, and you know, this prickliness and this just arranging all the players and you know, I don't know about you, but I've spent most of my life with an intense desire to win or be right. And neither one of those are good in a relationship, you know. And I no longer need to win, and I no longer need to be right. And you know, Patty's got a little more time with me, and I tell her, Patty, it's the quality, not the quantity, you know. And so I found myself very quickly, because of the work that I'm doing, very quickly, as soon as I say something, I'm making an amend. I'm cleaning it up instantly. I mean, instantly. And at first, you know, because I think probably I had conditioned Patty what kind of guy I really am, and so she didn't really, you know, she didn't make amends back. She didn't do anything. And over the years, we both clean things up, I mean, as quick as we can. To me, that's all alcoholism. You know, we are unfit. And as a matter of fact, when Patty, when I came to treatment in 2001, April 28th, you know, and again, I was still a mess. I couldn't believe that I drank. You know, I'd get, and I'm so ego-driven and didn't know it, because you know, you get 30-day chip, and in my head I'm saying, I want to say I've got 21 years and 30 days. You know, that 21 years meant everything to me. And, you know, it doesn't today, other than that it kept me out of jail. It gave me a career and an opportunity to be successful. But it has no real bearing on the quality of my sobriety. So how do I clean this up? You know, how do I really hold myself accountable in relationships? Well, I mean, what helped me first off more than anything is the four-point plan that Bill wrote. You know, in, you know, 11th step, and talks about it at the 10th step as well. You know, when something happens, and I know today, I don't know about you, but if I feel even a moment of discomfort, I know I'm off the beam, and so I'm compelled to, you know, give it to God, because I know what it is. Tell someone, and if amend is need, I make it right instantly. So this book has been so impactful for me. You know, I used to hear people say, you know, in AA we, you know, learn to grow up. So most of my life I knew how to spell man, but I had no idea what it was to be a man. Unless it was carrying a knife, a gun, and, you know, my old self knew what a man was. But how to be a man in sobriety, you know, was important to me. You know, when I was a kid in this crazy household I lived in, I had a grandmother, Nana. She died when I was 8, I think. But she used to sit me on my lap. She could read tea leaves, read palms. She would tell me things like, you know, and call me Willie back then. Willie, don't worry, someday you're going to be a really good boy. And I held on to that. You know, I think when she died, I just went over the hill, and the pedophile and booze. So here I am, 73, and let me tell you that it's terribly unattractive when a 73-year-old has a temper tantrum. Over nothing. You know, over an ego tag. You know, that, you know, like this thing just wins out, and I feel, well, you know, who's going to tell people things unless it's us, right? You know, and So I don't tell people things anymore, and I don't give advice anymore unless I'm asked. You know, I knew what everybody needed to do, right? At least that's what my head told me. Well, you know, if you just do this, and your life will be better. Not so. You know, then the last thing that I want to spend some time, what time is it? Yeah. The last thing that I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about is my practices, you know, because I can tell you that from the time that, you know, I lived most of my life on autopilot. And my sponsor says, you see those shadows out there? Those are people. And, you know, so most of my life, things were important. People were expendable. You know, they had no real value. At least the way my mind used to think. But this thing up here, you know, I know without any doubt in the world, from the time that I was born, this has been the only real problem. Yeah, there's some things in our life that are really truly unfortunate that happen. You know, pedophiles getting beat, truly unfortunate. But it's this that carries it for the next 50, 60, 70 years. And so I want to talk about some of those practices. Since I live in autopilot, and I do today, and I meditate, I pray, I'm in the literature, I do all kinds of things. On Tuesdays, I have an emotional sobriety group on Zoom with guys all over. I mean, I'm doing all kinds of things. But I'm the kind of guy that can have this, you know, nice meditation, and then 20 minutes later be this person in front of me at Starbucks, you know, is ordering too many things. And I'm not even in rush. I'm not even in any hurry. But my mind or somebody in the line, you know, is just, you know, and again, I'm not even in a hurry. So I need practices that I can take out into the life with me, you know, that are with me all the time. And that remind me who it is that's important in my life. And who it is that's important to my life is the God of my understanding. Without Him, I have nothing. Without Him, I will take your wallet here. I mean, I would just go back to the way I was. You know, you know, because it's like the bark in a tree. You know, the root. You know, but this program, because we have a daily reprieve and sometimes a moment-to-moment reprieve based on our fit spiritual condition, you know, for me, that's like front page news. I got to pay a lot of attention to this and not rest on my laurels, you know. And so a number of years ago, somebody asked me, well, Bill, you know, I mean, how do you want to be seen? You know, and I said, I want to be the man that my grandmother envisioned that I would be, or that my Creator would have me be. And when I do that, I can see how far I fall short. And I'm okay with that, because this whole human experience is all about discovering who we are, what we're here for, and how to make love work in it. You know, and so that's what I do. So some of the practices that I have is I do sensory-based meditation. You know, I call it that, but it's really heart-based meditation. You know, whether I put my hand on my heart and I breathe, or I could be doing a meditation in a business meeting and my eyes wide open and I'm just breathing, and I'm not looking at people and saying, okay, name their person, name. I'm looking at them as though looking through the lens of a movie camera, non-judgmentally, and I'm seeing size, color, shape, texture, sounds. I feel my feet planted in the ground, whether I'm sitting. If I don't feel my feet planted in the ground, I'm not here. I'm on autopilot, I promise you. Because we fall asleep in a nanosecond. I do anyway. Maybe you don't. And once I fall asleep, then I'm really doing good. Because autopilot's all about ego. So in meetings, if there was a time that because when I first became a CEO, there's another part of me that thought I'm a career criminal, habitual offender. What am I doing with these guys? And I would be really nervous about talking to them sometimes. And one year at a symposium, they picked me to be the chair of the symposium. I almost quit the group, because I had no idea what I would do or say. But I did get through it. So once I'm present, once I'm out of my head, I can feel my body, I can feel my feet, then I know I'm here. I'm right here. And in this position, I'm not going to say to Patty, or I'm not going to just grab the trash and storm away, or I'm not going to just be curt and rude to somebody that I care about because I'm in a hurry, And that's important to me because I really do. I believe that I was spared and lifted up out of this alcoholic scrap heap and given a position of responsibility and a position to love and be loved so that I can be of service, And first with my people, alcoholics, but then with my neighbors or my family, neighbors, community, in all of those areas, I need to plug in. I need to be around and plug in. And another practice that I have is that, all day long, I'm saying, thank you, Father. I say Father, I don't know, I can assure you that it's more towards Spirit of the Universe, Father, but that's, all day long it's thank you. And, your will, not mine. God, what would you have me do? I wake up in the morning and first thing I do before I'm out of bed is I thank my higher power for another day of sobriety. And that's a line drawn in the sand. And throughout the day, I'm bringing him in all the time. I went to the Usual Suspects about 10 years ago. It's a men's retreat in South Carolina, I think, or Tennessee. And about 60 men. It's a great retreat. And one of the guys that was speakers at the time, said, how often do you say, your will, not mine, or thank you, God? At that time, it didn't take me long to think of because it was zero. And but that being at that meeting that day was instrumental for me because it has not been zero since. It has become, a part of me. I avoid arguments. I can set boundaries. I can do that. But I don't want to have arguments. I don't need to win. I don't need to be right. And there was a time that I would have gotten in a fight over the order of the presidents, even if I knew I was wrong. And we've had those kind of things. Well, they're in this order. And so Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me a lot, and there's a couple other things I want to mention. I got cancer a few years ago, 5 years ago, coming up in December. And when I got it, Patty was just freaked out, understandably. But I wasn't, because I've been going to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings for a long time and watching, and I have seen men and women suffer every horrible experience with their children, husband, wife, mother, father, and they do it sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so when I got cancer, I told Patty, hey, hon, don't worry, it's just my time. This will all be okay one way or the other. But I truly didn't worry about it, and I didn't worry about it because of you. Because I saw you sitting in a meeting talking about one lady who was riding motorcycles with her husband right behind him, and he got sucked into a semi-truck, and she watched the whole thing. We learn how to deal with life on life's terms in these meetings. And for that, I am eternally grateful. Because I'm ready for the 500-mile-an-hour windstorm and hurricane in my life. I know exactly what to do. I come to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I talk to my sponsor. I connect with my men. And I'm hunkered down in the middle of the herd, book in hand, and I know I'm going to be okay, no matter what happens. And I'm so grateful for that. So I mentioned that Patty's my fourth wife. We got married. We'd been talking about it off and on for years. But we got married. My sponsor had been telling me for some time, in Alcoholics Anonymous, we make honest women out of our ladies, And we've been together 18, 19 years, And, we didn't just get married, but that was in there. And I told Patty about the conversation. And it was still another year or two later. People would ask me when we finally made the decision, do you think it's going to be any different? I would say, no. It's a piece of paper. That we're doing it for the piece of paper. But what in reality happened, we found probably a disbarred priest that still had marrying license and could still marry. And we asked him if he would do an AA meeting, an AA wedding, which we had never done. And we built the third step, the sixth step, and the seventh and 11th step into our marriage vows. And we wrote them. And when I see Patty come walking down, I'm right here. I'm fully present, and by the time she gets to me, and I see nothing but Patty, these big teardrops are coming down my eyes, and Patty just starts dabbing them, and we do this ceremony, and I can tell you that event for this 73-year-old man was the most meaningful event that I've ever had in my entire life, bar none. The beauty of being present, the beauty of not being on autopilot, and knowing with all my heart, what's important. And the last thing is that it took me forever to learn my truth, because, most of my life I'm more invested in impression management. I'm a profession, that's what I did for a living almost. And so, and it was more important for me personally that you think I'm doing well than to actually be doing well. And that's not true today. That what's important to me today is to be transparent, authentic, and as real as I know how to be. And I get all of that from Alcoholics Anonymous in this book. I'm so grateful to you, to my sponsor, to men all the way back to Bill and Bob. And in my mind, we make an unbroken chain all the way back to Bob, and women to woman, sponsor to sponsee, all the way back, an unbroken chain. And my commitment to Alcoholics Anonymous is that this link in the chain is one day at a time, not going to be a weak link, and that I commit to improving my spiritual condition on a regular basis, that I might be worthy of having this amazing, incredible, extraordinary life. I want to thank Jerry for just being an incredible friend and first inviting me to Lava Hot Springs, where I met a group of men and fell in love with them, and a couple of them here. It was such a treat to see Bartholomew here this evening. And some of the others were here for dinner. And then had the opportunity on Saturday night to speak in Hever at the Shack, which was just an extraordinary thing. And then yesterday morning at, what's the name of the group? Treatment? At another meeting. And my cup runneth over. And I am so grateful to you for sitting through this and tolerating. And I love you all, and so grateful for your hospitality and your kindness to me and to Patty. And so grateful to Lori and Hans that put us up for a couple of days, and we got to get some rocks and some very meaningful things. And thank you all, and I'll pass.
All right, thank you so much.